And welcome to another edition of South Texas Crossfire. This is Attorney Joe Flores reminding you to join us each and every week right here on KTMV with the Lopez family. Special thanks to my good friend Carlos Lopez and also his father, who we honor, who passed away this year, Don Humberto Lozano Lopez, who made all this possible. And the newest addition, his son, Anthony Humberto Lopez, celebrating over 3 weeks of broadcasting, a newborn. So we're very happy for the Lopez family. And don't forget, this also plays on KVTV, channel 13, CBS in Laredo. My good friend Gil doing a great job out there. Gabe Gonzalez and Gil doing a great job. And also, I'd like to thank our sponsors, River City Hospice, 882-5900. Hope, dignity, and love. It's got to be River City Hospice. And don't forget Vasquez Flores Home Health. Call 881-9922. Backed by over 20 years of experience, registered nurse Priscilla Vasquez can help you get a provider and prevent somebody from long-term care. With me today, I have the distinct pleasure of bringing on former federal judge Robert O'Connor. Welcome. How are you?
Oh, fine, thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us. You came in from Houston. I think you had a hearing in the Valley. Still practicing law after all this time, too. Tell the people a little bit about your education, training, and background.
Well, you know, the thing is, I went to undergraduate at the University of Texas, and then I went to the University of Texas Law School, despite the fact that my father advised me to take voice lessons instead of going to law school, because he said, voice lessons, that's where the money is. But I didn't pay much attention to him, although I was in the a cappella choir at the University of Texas.
And your father was in Hollywood. That's where you were born,
He started
correct?
in 1917. He went into the silent film business, and at that time he had 3 studios, Earthquake Comedies, O'Connor Productions, and Brentwood Studios. If he would have kept the real estate, well, we'd be in good shape right now, but he went under during the time of the talkies. He evidently didn't believe in the talkies and kept on making silent films, which was not a good idea.
And he came down to Laredo, is that correct?
Yes, he's from Laredo. His father was a British consul for northern Mexico, and his mother was from Santa Barbara, California. That's how the California orientation came about.
Well, and you got into law, and what area or where did you first start practicing law, Judge?
I started with Bismarck Pope, an old-time trial lawyer there in Laredo, and he had suffered a stroke, and so he couldn't sit first chair, and I would sit first chair in these trials, and he would sit behind me, and he'd whisper in my ear, but I could never understand him because his speech was
right,
impaired.
Exactly.
And so I would go on like... we had this one case where this roof had collapsed on this business, and it was a bar, and the fellow was suing the owner of the business, owner of the property rather. At any rate, he whispered in my ear because the owner had said, well, I lost this painting. And he whispered in my ear, and I couldn't understand him. And I said, was it a painting of a whore? And he said, no, he said, a horse. I told you a horse.
Oh, my goodness. And so the jury, I bet you they gasped and said,
right. So I quit trying to listen to what he told me from then on because I got it all confused.
Well, isn't that the way law practice is? Lesson learned. You only have to mess up once.
Right.
You know? So you started trying. So you started trying your own cases. You know.
Well, that's right, and it got my feet wet trying court-appointed cases, because in those days they didn't pay for court appointments. Nobody wanted them, so it was a virtual lure of a lot of cases that you could try and get experience, but you wouldn't get any money.
State or federal? Or both?
I did both. Sometimes I'd take on the entire federal docket because nobody would show up for Judge Conley or to appoint people to, you know, and so you'd be there in front of the bar, and he'd say, well, you go ahead and represent this gentleman. Mm-hmm. So I said, yes. So I plead him not guilty, and we would try the cases lickety-split because he wouldn't give you too much time, you know. So I've heard enough counsel, you know, stuff like that.
Right.
The federal court, the state court, they're a little more reserved. But I also practiced with a gentleman by the name of Jimmy Allred, who was from Corpus Christi, who had been governor of the state of Corpus Christi. And he was a wonderful person. He was, he had a humility about him. You wouldn't think that he'd been governor of the state and run for Senate.
Oh, you meant state of Texas. When I heard state of Corpus Christi, I went, what?
No, state of Texas.
State of Texas, yes.
Well, I'm trying to go too fast, I think. But anyway, Allred had a lot of humility, and he had been governor of the state of Texas. He'd run for Senate and had been defeated. Had he won the election, he's defeated by Pappy Leo Daniel. Had he won the election, he would have run with Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Oh, my goodness.
And the person then that Franklin Delano Roosevelt chose to run with him was Harry Truman, became president. Otherwise, Allred would have become president of the United States. But there he was as a federal judge. He had been a federal judge before. He resigned to run for Senate, and then he got reappointed federal judge.
Now that's political stroke.
That is stroke.
To get back on that, because that appointment is not easy. We just had Nelva Gonzalez Ramos. Congratulations to her and her family. Get on, and we're going to talk about your experience when you took the federal bench. But it's a great ceremony. I know you had some legal conflicts that you had to go and represent some people. But, it's a big process, isn't it, to get approved as a federal judge?
Yes, first place, you have to get nominated by a senator. And it's a big deal because right now you have a Democratic president, but you have 2 Republican senators. So she would have to have gotten one of the senators to recommend her, or somebody to recommend her, or maybe perhaps a congressman to recommend her. And then the president would appoint her with the advice and consent of the Senate, which means that she'd have to go to a Senate hearing by the Judiciary Committee and pass that obstacle and then be appointed. And there's a whole bunch of folks that have been nominated, but they haven't gone through the process because it takes so long. And, you can break a lawyer who's being appointed because he's not going to take any new cases because he's waiting for the appointment. And there he is in this logjam and doesn't get his hearing. So she was lucky that she got in without taking 2 or 3 years.
Well, and it did take some time. It was, I think, about a year and a half. But let's talk about your experience about being appointed. Who appointed you?
I was appointed, I was supposed to be a Nixon appointee, but something happened to him. And I was appointed by Gerald Ford.
On August 9th, 1973, perhaps?
Yeah.
Right.
But Ford appointed me, and I was actually recommended by John Tower.
Oh, yes.
And I knew John Tower on a first-name basis. So it's easier to get appointed or nominated if you know a senator on a first-name basis.
Yes.
And I was a county chairman, a Republican county chairman, and a member of the state Republican Executive Committee at the time. So it was kind of a natural thing because there weren't that many Republican lawyers in South Texas that I would throw my hat in the ring for a federal judge, and I was pushed there by a Democratic federal judge, Ben C. Connolly, who told me that he was going to take senior status, and he had the Laredo docket, and he said, "You're the lead Republican in the area. You ought to throw your hat in the ring." And so I did.
Now, everybody and their mom, you were Republican when Republican wasn't cool in Texas.
That's right.
I mean, all these other guys jump on the bandwagon when it looked, but you were really one of the first. There were so many that whites and Hispanics that were, primarily whites that were Democrat at the time, along with Hispanics. There were so many. It was a Democratic control thing, not like nowadays.
Yeah, well, I think Lyndon Johnson kept a lot of folks in the Democratic Party that might have jumped over to the Republican Party.
Gotcha.
But he had a kind of a discipline, and he had power, actually, to keep folks in the Democratic Party. But after his demise, a lot of folks jumped over, and especially the religious right, which was a part of the Democratic Party, jumped into the Republican Party. Well,
we were talking about that. I guess we were having some lunch in Houston when you were telling me about that, and I I thought about that sometime, and on the second half of the show, we got a couple of minutes left, but you know, I wanted to ask, how long were you up there as a federal judge?
About 10 years. I resigned. I had too many kids in college at the same time. And they didn't pay as much then as they do now. But when I got on the bench, I was the youngest man on the bench, and the oldest was Alan B. Haney in the Southern District. And Alan B. Haney was about 91 when I got on the bench.
How old were you, Judge?
41.
Oh, boy.
So I used to have lunch with Alan Haney, and he would tell me, just take it slow and easy, slow and easy. So that's what I did. You know, I wouldn't get excited about trying to diminish the docket, kick cases out. I would hear everything and to handle the matter in a relaxed manner and make the attorneys that were before me relaxed also, rather than create more tension.
Well, I tell you what, you know, Nelva Gonzalez Ramos taking it. I've seen a lot of new faces in there. I've been practicing there nearly a decade, and I think some of the people in there are going to think that it's easy. It's not an easy docket. Federal court is very demanding.
And I think also the criminal business was probably the most difficult for me, the sentencing part, because
yes.
You have a guy that is a bad actor in front of you, and he has a nice family. So
yes.
Your sentence affects everybody, the family, his children, everybody's affected by your sentence. So you have to be very careful about what you do and try to do the best you can and try to do justice at the same time. Of course, now things are completely different because you have guidelines for sentencing, which we did not have, which I'm against, because I believe if you put good people on the bench, you should let those good people use their discretion in sentencing.
Well, we're going to take a break, and when we get back, we're really going to get into the nuts and bolts of federal practice. We're also going to talk about tort reform and your views on that. You're listening to Robert O'Connor, watching him right here on KTMB, and thanks to our sponsors, River City Hospice, 882-5900, and Vasquez Flores Home Health, 881-9922. We'll be back after these messages.
Have you been arrested or are potentially facing criminal charges? You need a trial attorney who is well-versed in the courtroom. Joe Flores has handled hundreds of criminal cases and many of them to trial. Joe Flores can provide you with competent representation to protect your constitutional rights in state and federal court. Joe Flores can help if you have been arrested or facing criminal charges. The law offices of Joe Flores. Equal justice for all.
Attention Reglan users. Reglan, also known as metoclopramide, is a drug used to treat reflux and other stomach conditions. Reglan can be safe and effective for many, but it has also been linked to tardive dyskinesia, a severe neurological disorder. Symptoms can include abnormal movement of the tongue, face, arms, legs, and body, or abnormal muscular contractions. If you or someone you love has taken Reglan for 3 months or longer and suffered any of these symptoms, call Attorney at Law Joe Flores, 361-887-8670.
Each year, millions of Americans are severely injured or killed on our highways in trucking accidents needlessly. Motorists near the border are especially vulnerable. The law offices of Joe Flores can help provide you with information if you or a loved one has suffered a serious injury as a result of a negligent truck driver. Joe Flores is backed by extensive experience as a trial lawyer and a medical professional. Joe Flores can provide you with a prompt and accurate case evaluation. Contact us toll-free today, 888-259-5721 for a free consultation. The law offices of Joe Flores. Equal justice for all.
Attention! Was your child born with a birth defect? Some prescription drugs taken during pregnancy have been linked to birth defects, including antidepressants Paxil, Zoloft, Prozac, Wellbutrin, and Lexapro. Also, prescription-strength pain relievers containing codeine, such as Vicodin and Tylenol 3 with codeine. If you or your loved ones took any of these prescription drugs while pregnant and your child was born with a birth defect, call nurse practitioner and attorney Joe Flores at 887-8670. That's 887-8670. Call today.